All right, good evening. Today is August 29th, 2024, and we are here with Mr. Fred Blackburn as our presenter this evening, and I'm going to let him take it away.
All right, thanks, Diana. As I really enjoyed last night, last week, I hope you all did too. And for this week, we're going to talk about theologically difficult passages in the Bible, or things that may appear contradictory or just seem so contrary to human reason or understanding of how things work. So any questions before we get going? All right. I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint I made just for some visuals. I like the visuals. Can you all see the PowerPoint? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So difficult passages and concepts in the Bible and various theological schools of thought. The one I wanted to start with tonight is this idea of sovereignty of God versus the free will of man. And we don't have to set it up as verses, but like I was saying, it's almost like a teeter-totter, right? Where if you're heavy on sovereignty, you're going to be light on free will. And if you're heavy on free will, you're going to be light on the sovereignty. And this used to drive me crazy as a young man in my late teens, early 20s, when I became aware of these doctrines. I was brought up in more of probably leaned more on the free will end of the spectrum. But as I studied and learned more and started approaching different theologians, I found many theologians landed more on the sovereignty end of the spectrum, and some very much so. And the two theological camps that kind of arose through church history that probably best personify these two views would be Arminius, and he was kind of the champion of the free will position, this idea of human responsibility, that it was even our salvation itself was like a co-effort between God, who reaches down to man, and man reaches up, and that's kind of how salvation happens. It's God and us working together to get us over the line. Where if you're looking at more of a Calvinist perspective, and you're probably all familiar with the acronym TULIP, where we have T stands for total depravity, U for, I thought it was unmerited favor, but it could also, anyone have another one for U? L is limited atonement. And my understanding of that is Jesus died for those that would be saved. His blood was not wasted on those who would not be saved. We have irresistible grace, meaning if God has predestined you to be saved, you're going to be saved whether you want to or not, or he'll make you want to be saved, I think is the understanding. And then P is probably my favorite of the TULIP, is perseverance or preservation of the saints. And this is the idea that since salvation is all about God and his work, and it's not about us and our participation, that God is the one that saves us and seals us. He is the one that holds us. So it would be like an eternal security idea, this preservation of the saints. So that's that view in a nutshell. Let's go back to our share. All right, so I went through and just grabbed, you could do an exhaustive study of this if you want, but I just wanted to give you a sampler, because if you're trying to use the Bible as your guide for issues such as this is where it can become quite problematic, because the Bible just seems scattered from beginning of end, seems to talk about both of these issues quite strongly. And I'm just going to go through these quickly, and I think you have access to this PowerPoint in case you want to look these up later. But I'm just going to do a quick highlight of each of these verses. I'm going to start on the sovereignty side. So Ephesians 1:11. In him we have obtained an inheritance, having been predestined according to the purpose of him who works all things according to the counsel of his will. Before we go on, let's make sure we define our terms here. So anyone want to tell me what predestined or predestination means?
I feel like it's already in the plans, like in the plans that God has for our life.
Yes, like predetermined, could be quite simple. And what's interesting to me, and I did not know this until much later when I started studying philosophy at San Diego State, but what shocked me was many secular humanists and philosophers that are atheist or agnostic are also determinists. They don't call it predestination, they simply call it determinism. But many of them are materialistic. And what I mean by that is they only believe the physical material world exists. So, and we talked about this before. So like we have a body, but we don't have a soul or a spirit. And we have a brain, we don't have a mind. That was how they were approaching things. But even they saw it as just almost like cosmic billiard balls or cosmic dominoes, and one material event caused the next and the next and the next, all the way to ourselves, and that we are just a result of these cosmic atoms smashing into each other and then moving on. And I just thought, wow, that's so interesting. So we have both religious predestination and materialistic determinism, and it's really interesting to hear those arguments. Okay, onward. Romans 8:28, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose. So there we're focused on the calling of God. Matthew 10:29 through 31. Are not two sparrows sold for a penny, and not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father? But even the hairs of your head are numbered. Fear not, therefore, for you are of more value than many sparrows. And that kind of addresses the intimacy of how well God knows us. He doesn't just know our names or where we live, he knows how many hairs are on our head. Colossians 1:16 and 17. For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things consist. In other words, there is nothing apart from God. And this is one of my favorite things from the medieval scholastics when they talk about God. And the medieval scholastics believed there was actually only one substance in the universe, but they define substance as that which is self-consisting and self-existing. Okay, let me say that a little more. Substance is that which is self-existing and self-consisting. That was my dyslexia showing itself. Okay. And what all other beings beside God are contingent, meaning we have not always existed, and we are dependent on something outside of ourselves for our continuation. And so God, by definition, would be the only substance in the universe, because he is the only self-existing, self-consisting being. Fascinating. Okay.